Sprinkle 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt on your plant, and in 7 days, it'll triple in size. You've probably heard that exact claim before. Maybe from another gardening channel, maybe from a blog post with a thumbnail that looked a little too perfect. And maybe you even tried it yourself, expecting that dramatic, overnight transformation. And nothing happened. If that's you, I need you to keep watching, because you didn't do anything wrong. Here's the truth nobody on the internet wants to tell you. Epsom salt does not magically triple plant growth. It never has. That claim has been copied and pasted across gardening blogs and videos for years. And it's exactly why so many people try it once, see nothing dramatic happen, and write the whole thing off as a myth completely. But here's what's actually strange. Thousands of gardeners, including me, swear by Epsom salt. Our roses bloom heavier. Our tomatoes come in stronger. Our leaves turn a deep, healthy green almost overnight. So which is it? Is Epsom salt useless, or is it one of the best-kept secrets in gardening? The real answer is neither. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which plants it actually works for, why it failed for you if it did, and the precise way to use it so you get real, visible results. Not a viral myth that was never true to begin with. Stay all the way to the end, because I'm also going to show you the one mistake that makes Epsom salt completely useless, even when you're using it on exactly the right plant. Welcome back to Senior Green Haven. I'm glad you're here. This channel is built on one simple idea, helping you grow a garden you're genuinely proud of, using honest information, not exaggerated claims chasing clicks. We'd rather tell you the slower, more boring truth than the exciting lie, because the truth is actually the thing that grows your garden. If that sounds like your kind of channel, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's get into the truth about Epsom salt, where the myth came from. Let's deal with the headline claim first, because I'm not going to dance around it. There is no scientific study, no university extension office, and no horticulturist anywhere that has ever shown 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt tripling plant growth in 7 days. That number doesn't exist in research, it exists in thumbnails. Here's what Epsom salt actually is. It's magnesium sulfate, a naturally occurring mineral compound made of magnesium and sulfur. That's it. It's not a fertilizer, it's not a growth hormone, and it's not some kind of steroid for your garden. It supplies exactly 2 nutrients, and nothing more than that. So why does this myth keep spreading? Year after year, video after video. Because the truth is genuinely useful, but it's not exciting enough for a headline. Epsom salt can correct a specific nutrient deficiency in certain plants, doesn't get clicks. Triples your plants in a week does. One of those sentences sells and the other one is simply accurate. Here's the part that matters most, and the part almost nobody explains clearly. If your soil already has enough magnesium and sulfur, adding more does nothing. Not a little something, nothing at all. You can't fix a problem that isn't there in the first place. That's the single biggest reason people try this once, feel let down, and never try it again. They weren't doing anything wrong. Their technique wasn't the issue. The plant simply didn't need what they were giving it. Think of it like this. If you're not deficient in vitamin C, taking an extra dose doesn't make you healthier. It just passes right through you. Soil minerals work the exact same way. Epsom salt isn't magic. It's a correction. And corrections only do something when there's actually something to correct. Which plants it actually works for, 415 to 8. So if it's not a magic growth potion, what is it actually good for? This is the part most videos skip entirely, because explaining it properly takes more than 15 seconds. Epsom salt helps plants that are genuinely magnesium or sulfur deficient, and certain plant families are simply more prone to that deficiency than others, because they're heavy feeders that pull magnesium out of the soil faster than it naturally gets replaced by rainfall and decomposing organic matter. Tomatoes and peppers. These are the classic candidates, and probably the reason this myth took off in the first place. They're heavy feeders, and magnesium deficiency in tomatoes shows up in a very specific way, yellowing between the leaf veins while the veins themselves stay green. If you've seen that exact pattern on your tomato plants, Epsom salt can genuinely help, and you'll usually see a difference within a few weeks. Roses. Roses are notorious among experienced gardeners for pulling magnesium from the soil quickly, especially in sandy soil, or soil that's been heavily watered and leached over time. A deficiency here often shows up as pale, weak new growth, and noticeably smaller blooms than the plant produced the year before. Peppers and eggplant. Same family logic as tomatoes here. Heavy feeders, prone to the same deficiency pattern, and they respond to correction in a similar time frame. Houseplants in old, depleted potting soil. This one surprises a lot of people. Container plants can't pull magnesium from the surrounding earth the way garden plants growing directly in the ground can. Over a year or two of regular watering, the limited soil in a pot simply runs out of available magnesium, and there's nowhere else for the roots to find more. Now here's who it generally will not help, and this list matters just as much as the first one. Plants growing in naturally magnesium-rich soil, which, depending on where you live, might be most of your garden already. Plants that are struggling because of overwatering, underwatering, poor light, or a pest issue, none of those are nutrient problems, and Epsom salt simply cannot fix something that was never a nutrient deficiency to begin with. And succulents or cacti, which need very little magnesium to thrive and can actually be harmed by an excess of salts building up around their roots. Here's the test that actually matters, the one test you should run before you ever open that jar. Look closely at the leaves, yellowing specifically between dark green veins, especially showing up on the older, lower leaves first, is the classic visual sign of magnesium deficiency. If you don't see that exact pattern anywhere on your plant, Epsom salt likely isn't your fix, and using it anyway won't help, and in some cases can mildly hurt. Quick pause here. If this is clearing up something you've wondered about for a while, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this honest version of the story reach more people instead of the exaggerated one that's been floating around for years. And down in the comments, tell me, have you tried Epsom salt before? And did you actually notice a difference? Or did it feel like nothing happened? I genuinely want to know, and I read every single comment. Stick around, because next I'm going to walk you through the 3 mistakes that quietly make Epsom salt useless, even on the right plant. And then I'll show you exactly how to tell, in under a minute, whether your specific plant needs this at all. The 3 mistakes that ruin it. This is the part that decides whether Epsom salt does something for your garden or absolutely nothing at all, even when you've picked the right plant. Mistake number 1, using it as a substitute for fertilizer. Epsom salt supplies magnesium and sulfur only. It contains 0 nitrogen, 0 phosphorus, and 0 potassium, the 3 nutrients plants need in the largest amounts, and the 3 that drive overall size, root development, and flowering. If your plant is genuinely hungry for those, Epsom salt alone will never fix it, no matter how often or how generously you apply it. Mistake number 2, applying it too often or too concentrated. More is not better here, and this trips up a lot of well-meaning gardeners. Over-applying Epsom salt can actually build up salts in the soil over time, which makes it physically harder for roots to absorb water at all. The exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. A plant drowning in excess salt looks remarkably similar to a plant that's thirsty, which leads people to apply even more, making the problem worse. Mistake number 3, using it on plants that show no deficiency symptoms at all. If there's no yellowing, no weak new growth, no visible sign of a problem anywhere on the plant, you're not correcting anything by applying Epsom salt. You're simply adding salt to soil that was already perfectly balanced, and at best you're wasting a tablespoon. At worst, you're nudging that soil slightly out of balance. Here's the correct way to use it, broken down plant by plant, so there's no guesswork left. For tomatoes and peppers, dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of water. Apply it as a soil drench once a month during the growing season, starting when you first notice the deficiency pattern or right as the plant begins flowering, whichever comes first. For roses, sprinkle 1 tablespoon around the base of each established bush in early spring, then water it in thoroughly so it reaches the root zone. A second, lighter application can go down right as the first buds begin forming for the season. For container houseplants in old soil, mix 1 tablespoon per gallon of water and use it in place of 1 regular watering session, no more than once a month at most. And the single most important rule across every single one of these methods: always water in thoroughly after applying and never apply to dry soil. Epsom salt needs moisture to dissolve and travel down to the root zone where it's actually needed. Applied dry, it can simply sit on the surface of the soil and do almost nothing at all, no matter how correct your timing was otherwise. The 60-second deficiency check. Before you apply any Epsom salt at all, do this quick check. It takes less than a minute and it will save you from wasting your time on a plant that doesn't need it. Look at the older, lower leaves first, not the new growth at the top. Deficiencies almost always show up there before they ever reach the newest leaves, because the plant is smart enough to pull existing magnesium out of its older leaves first, in order to support new growth at the top. You're looking for one very specific pattern: yellowing that appears between the veins, while the veins themselves stay noticeably green. That pattern has a name. It's called inter-veinal chlorosis, and it's the clearest, most reliable visible sign of a true magnesium shortage. If you see that pattern, good news. Epsom salt, applied correctly using the methods above, can genuinely help within 2 to 3 weeks. Not 7 days and certainly not tripled growth, but a real visible improvement in leaf color and overall plant vigor that you'll actually be able to see with your own eyes. If you don't see that pattern anywhere on the plant, save your Epsom salt for another day. Your plant's issue is almost certainly something else entirely: light, water, pests, or a completely different nutrient. And adding more magnesium won't touch the actual problem. In that case, the kindest thing you can do for that plant is look elsewhere for the real cause, rather than reaching for the jar out of habit. More plants people ask about? Now, since we're already this deep into the truth, let's go past the basics, because I get asked about specific plants constantly in the comments, and the honest answer is different for almost every single one. Citrus trees. If you grow lemon, lime, or orange trees, especially in containers, this is actually one of the better candidates on this entire list. Citrus trees are heavy feeders, and magnesium deficiency in citrus shows up as a very distinct yellow banding pattern between the veins, sometimes called a Christmas tree pattern, because of how it spreads outward from the center vein. If you see that on your citrus leaves, a monthly Epsom salt drench during the growing season, using the same 1 tablespoon per gallon ratio, can genuinely help restore that deep green color over several weeks. Hydrangeas. People ask about this one constantly because of the myth that Epsom salt changes hydrangea bloom color. It does not. Bloom color in hydrangeas is controlled by soil pH and aluminum availability, not magnesium. If your hydrangeas are pale or yellowing between the veins, Epsom salt can help with overall plant health, but it will not turn your pink hydrangeas blue. That requires a completely different soil amendment, usually aluminum sulfate or garden sulfur to lower pH, lawns. This comes up a lot too. A general lawn-wide Epsom salt application is rarely worth it, because most lawn problems come down to nitrogen, mowing height, or watering schedule, not magnesium. If you've had a soil test done and it specifically shows a magnesium deficiency, a light, even broadcast application can help. Without that test, you're guessing, and grass is cheap enough that a proper lawn fertilizer is almost always the better first step. Vegetable seedlings and young transplants. Be especially careful here. Young, tender root systems are far more sensitive to any kind of salt concentration than mature plants are. If you're going to use Epsom salt on seedlings at all, cut the standard ratio in half and only do it if you're seeing that clear inter-veinal yellowing pattern we talked about earlier. Otherwise, leave young plants alone and let them establish first succulents and cacti. One more time. I mentioned this briefly already, but it deserves its own moment because it's one of the most common mistakes I see. These plants evolved in mineral-poor, fast-draining soil, and they simply don't need much magnesium at all. Worse, their root systems are particularly sensitive to salt buildup. If you've been adding Epsom salt to your succulents because you saw it recommended somewhere, I genuinely encourage you to stop. It's far more likely to cause root stress than to help. Other gardening myths that follow the same pattern. Here's something worth pointing out because once you understand why the Epsom salt myth spread, you'll start noticing the exact same pattern everywhere else in gardening content. The eggshell myth, you've probably heard that eggshells stop blossom and rot in tomatoes by adding calcium to the soil. The truth is more complicated. Eggshells do contain calcium, but they break down so slowly that by the time any meaningful calcium reaches your plant's roots, an entire growing season may have already passed. Blossom end rot is almost always caused by inconsistent watering, not a true calcium shortage in the soil. Sound familiar? Same shape as the Epsom salt story. A real mineral, a real plant problem, but the wrong solution for the wrong cause, repeated until it became gardening folklore. The banana peel myth. Banana peels are often sold as a potassium miracle for roses and tomatoes. Banana peels do contain potassium, but again in such a slow-release form that burying a peel rarely moves the needle in any single growing season. It's not harmful, but it's also not the dramatic fix it's made out to be. The coffee grounds myth. Used coffee grounds are often recommended as a way to acidify soil for plants like blueberries or azaleas. Fresh coffee grounds are mildly acidic, but used grounds, the kind most people are actually applying, are nearly neutral by the time they've been through a coffee maker. They can add a small amount of organic matter and nitrogen over time, but they won't meaningfully shift your soil's pH the way people expect. Notice the pattern across every single one of these. There's always a real ingredient with a real, scientifically accurate property. There's always a real plant problem it could theoretically relate to. And there's always a massive gap between this contains the right mineral and this will dramatically fix your plant in a week. That gap is exactly where every one of these myths lives and breeds, and it's exactly the gap we just walked through together with Epsom salt. Frequently asked questions. Let's run through a few of the most common questions I get on this topic, quickly, one after another. Can I use Epsom salt and regular fertilizer at the same time? Yes, absolutely. And in most cases, you should. Epsom salt is not a replacement for fertilizer. It's a supplement for one specific, narrow situation. Continue your regular fertilizing schedule and only add Epsom salt on top of that if you're seeing the specific deficiency pattern we covered. What if I don't see improvement after a few applications? If you've applied it correctly, 3 to 4 times, spaced appropriately, and you're still not seeing any change in that yellowing pattern, it's time to stop and look elsewhere. At that point, the deficiency either wasn't magnesium to begin with or something else, like a pest problem under the leaves or a root issue, is overriding any benefit the Epsom salt could provide. Is Epsom salt the same as table salt or rock salt? No, and this is an important distinction. Table salt and rock salt are sodium chloride, which is genuinely harmful to plants in any real quantity. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate, a completely different compound with no sodium in it at all. Don't let the word salt in the name confuse the two. Can I make my own soil test instead of guessing? Yes, and honestly, I'd recommend it if you're applying any soil amendment regularly. Inexpensive home soil test kits can give you a rough read on your soil's existing nutrient levels, and many local extension offices offer more accurate lab testing for a small fee. A few dollars spent on a proper test will save you from guessing with every amendment you ever apply, not just this one. How long does an opened container of Epsom salt actually last? Indefinitely, as long as you keep moisture out of it. It's a stable mineral compound, not an organic material that breaks down or expires. Store it in a sealed container in a dry spot, and a single bag can realistically last you for years of occasional use. A simple seasonal checklist you can actually follow before we wrap up. Let me leave you with something practical you can actually act on, instead of just facts to remember. Here's how this fits into your year, season by season. Early spring. This is when you do your first checks. Walk your garden and look specifically at any roses, tomatoes you're starting indoors, or citrus trees that struggled the year before. If you saw that yellowing pattern last season, this is the moment to start your first light application as new growth begins. Late spring, as plants start flowering. This is the second checkpoint. Tomatoes and peppers that are heading into their first bloom are at their highest magnesium demand, since flowering and fruit set pull heavily on the plant's mineral reserves. If the deficiency pattern is present, this is your prime window for a drench, midsummer. By now, your monthly schedule for any deficient plants should already be running. This is also a good time to double-check container houseplants, since a full summer of regular watering is exactly when their limited soil reserves tend to run thin. Early fall. As the growing season winds down, taper off any Epsom salt applications. Plants heading into dormancy don't need the same mineral support, and there's no benefit to feeding a plant that's slowing down rather than actively growing. Winter. Don't apply anything at all to dormant plants. This is your planting season instead. A good time to order a soil test kit if you don't already have one, so you're not guessing again next spring. Print that out, stick it on the fridge, or just remember the shape of it. Check in spring, feed through the growing season if needed. Taper in fall, rest in winter. That's the entire system, and it costs you almost nothing beyond a few dollars for a jar that will likely outlast the whole gardening year. So here's the honest truth, laid out plainly. Epsom salt will not triple your plant's growth in 7 days. That claim was never real. And it never will be, no matter how many times it gets repeated online. But for the right plants, tomatoes, peppers, roses, and depleted container soil, used correctly, and only when there's an actual deficiency present, it can genuinely improve leaf color, bloom size, and overall plant health in a real, measurable way. The difference between the people who swear by Epsom salt and the people who think it's a complete myth almost always comes down to exactly one thing: whether the plant actually needed magnesium in the first place. Both groups are telling the truth about their own experience. They just happen to be growing very different plants in very different soil. So tell me, are you going to check your tomatoes for that yellowing pattern this week? Treat your roses this spring? Or skip the whole thing entirely because your plants simply don't show the signs? Let me know down in the comments. I really do want to hear which way you're leaning. If you're not subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. I'd genuinely rather you hear the honest version of gardening advice than the exciting version that was built for clicks and nothing else. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Now get out there, go check those leaves, and grow something amazing. I'll see you in the next one. Senior Green Haven.